So while everyone is just letting us know where they're joining us from, I will just take a minute to introduce myself and the event. Hi again, everyone. I'm Danielle Samlin. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at the Center on Rural Innovation, and I really am delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar. At CORI, we believe, we know that rural America is rich with entrepreneurial talent, innovation, and opportunity. Today's conversation will explore what happens when we move beyond baseline assumptions and we look closely at data, at the ecosystems, and the people driving entrepreneurship in rural communities. Before we begin, I want to extend a very special thank you to Capital One for supporting this work and for helping advance our collective understanding of rural entrepreneurship and economic opportunity. So with that, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Amanda Weinstein, CORI's Director of Research. Amanda's work focuses on rural economic development, on entrepreneurship, and on workforce trends. And she led the team behind CORI's Rural Entrepreneurship Index. And today she'll share key insights into what the research tells us about the state of entrepreneurship across rural America. Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate that introduction. I am so excited to be with you all today and to be talking about rural entrepreneurship in America. Really, the goal here is to measure what we want to grow in rural America. Here at the Center on Rural Innovation, we know that small towns are home to big ideas and that new models of economic development can empower rural communities to grow innovative businesses from the ground up. And when we talk to rural Americans, we know that rural Americans are more likely to say that they want to own their own business one day. So this is the result of a survey that shows rural Americans were more likely to say that than their non-rural counterparts. And we can see that across generations in rural America, from rural millennials, rural Gen Z to rural Gen X, all are more likely to want to start their own business one day. We also know another measure of entrepreneurship here, when we look at self-employment rates, rural self-employment rates are higher than non-rural America and have been for decades. But we know that business startup rates have declined nationwide, and the steepest drops have been in rural America. So what this chart looks at is the rate at which we're starting new businesses, right? And you can see that steady decline for decades. If you look back into the 1980s, at one point, rural America was actually able to start businesses at the same rate as non-rural America. But that's not the story today. Today, we see a widening gap. You do see some tick up there post-COVID, which is great. But this has been a concerning trend for especially economists for quite some time, thinking about how we're starting new businesses in America. Why does this matter? One, we have a host of research on rural economic development that shows the importance of entrepreneurship for helping rural counties across the country. And what this also means is when we look at how rural America is doing, we can see that rural America has lost access to opportunity. They've lost access to the opportunity to start their own business, which also means they've lost access to opportunity in terms of jobs. What this chart is showing you is this widening gap between rural and non-rural America when it comes to access to jobs. This is a very concerning trend. It means that rural residents don't have access to the jobs that they need to support their families and live the life they want to lead. And so when we look at how this happened, when we look at these larger economic shifts that have happened, these shifting economic headwinds, we see that decline in entrepreneurship is a key shift that has disproportionately negatively affected rural America, along with shifts in globalization and automation. But I think the decline in entrepreneurship is one trend we don't talk enough about. Let's go to the other two trends first. When we break out the three large sectors that are in rural and non-rural America, so if you've been to one of our webinars before, you have likely seen this chart. On the left, we see rural America, and we see the share of their industries in tradable goods, local services, and tradable services. And on the right, we can compare that to non-rural America. What you see on the left is that rural America still disproportionately relies on traditional rural sectors in the tradable goods sector. This includes manufacturing, mining, farming, and we know that over time, this over reliance on these sectors has led to lower job growth in rural America. What this means is if you look at the peak of manufacturing employment in the US in 1979, down from there, and the number of jobs that rural America has lost, rural areas have lost 1.2 million manufacturing jobs in the 3 decades after 1979. That is a huge hit, and it varies across the nation. So what this map is showing you, all of the green areas you see are rural areas that are disproportionately reliant on those tradable goods sectors. That could be manufacturing, mining, agriculture. The dark purplish color you see there, those are metropolitan areas or non-rural areas that are disproportionately on tradable goods. And we can see that these trends that have affected this tradable goods sector disproportionately affects those areas in rural America. This doesn't mean that rural America isn't producing goods. When you look at these three dashed lines here for farming, manufacturing, and mining, what you see is a steady trend upwards. We see that rural America continues to produce the food that we put on our tables. They produce manufacturing goods. They produce mining output to help us run our businesses and our homes, right? We see that rural America is continuing to produce that output from those sectors. But when you look at the solid line in each of these sectors, what you see is it's flat or even declining. What that means is it isn't coming with jobs like it did one day. What this means is this is largely a story of automation. As these three sectors have become highly productive, we can produce more output with fewer jobs. And this has disproportionately affected rural America's access to jobs. So we know that productivity is rising. We know that each rural worker is able to produce more than they did decades ago. The problem is wages aren't following. What this graph shows you nationally is labor's share of GDP. This is the share of GDP of that output that workers get to take home. And when you see this declining trend, what that means is that workers have less and less benefit from the productivity advances that they are making. So we can see in 1970, workers captured about 65 cents of every dollar in output. By 2023, that had fallen to 57 cents, an 8-point shift, which amounts to trillions of dollars from wages to profits and the owners of companies. And we see this when we ask rural Americans about wanting to start a business. One of the benefits they say is a lot of people start their own businesses because it's hard to make good money unless you do. This is from a millennial in the rural South. And we see that this is true. Not only does entrepreneurship benefit rural communities and rural economic development, it also benefits entrepreneurs. We know that rural entrepreneurs out-earn rural wage workers by about 30%. And the premium of being an entrepreneur is actually larger in rural America than non-rural America. What that means is there are big benefits to being an entrepreneur in rural America. And this is where it has become harder to be an entrepreneur in rural America. When we go back to looking at those large three sectors in rural places, what we see is the harder trend, the bigger problem is really those tradable services. As our nation's economy has shifted more towards tradable services sector, these are sectors in the knowledge economy. These are things like technology jobs and businesses. This is also business and finance, all of these different sectors incorporated here in the tradable services or the knowledge economy. We see this shift has disproportionately benefited large incumbent cities the most, which means it's left out rural America. We do see an upward trend here, but still a large gap in tradable services in rural America. And this map looks completely different, right? We do see in the green some rural areas who have been able to pivot into that tradable services sector, but it's been a much bigger pivot in our non-rural areas, that dark purple that you see, right? So this Begs the question of, all right, how do we pivot into that new sector? That's entrepreneurship. Especially in rural areas, one business can have an even larger impact on diversifying the local economy. We know that entrepreneurship is a key to making rural America more resilient. And when we think about where the job growth comes from, when we talk about jobless growth or the widening gap in access to jobs, the first question we should be asking is what's happening to our startups? What does that look like in rural communities? When you look at job creation rates, we see that for both rural and non-rural America, job creation rates are highest for those young new startups. So this is all our big reason of why we wanted to create this index. If rural entrepreneurship is important, we should be able to measure it and to check it easily. Our metrics should align with the future that we're trying to build. And here's the but. Entrepreneurship isn't just one number. It's a pattern. I kind of think of it like this quilt here I'm showing from the Missouri Star Quilt Company. It is not just a single number. It is a pattern of 11 different indicators that we have used here to try to uncover what the pattern of entrepreneurship looks like across the country. Entrepreneurship is also multifaceted. So the way that we think about this is we look at three different kind of pillars of entrepreneurship, all to help us uncover those patterns. We use a technique called a robust principal component analysis. If anyone out there is familiar with that technique, it essentially lets us uncover the pattern in all of these different indicators across the country. So I mentioned those three pillars of entrepreneurship. So the way that we think about this, on the left here, we have entrepreneurial capacity. There, this is really the indicator we're using as a self-employment share. It's really getting at what is that underlying capacity and ability for entrepreneurship in a place. The next pillar is business dynamism. So here we measure this typically as the business entry and yes, even business exit rates. What this is looking at is the pace at which we are starting new businesses, also exiting. For those familiar with more entrepreneurial ecosystems, they know that those higher entry rates also tend to come with higher exit rates. And it's not a bug of the system, it's actually a feature. If you think about those serial entrepreneurs might start a couple businesses that fail before they get to that one great business that doesn't fail, that has that staying power. And those ones that failed were learning opportunities that led to that great business. Right? So we know that entrepreneurial places tend to have both higher entry rates and also higher exit rates. And they also tend to be more innovative. So we wanted to also capture the entrepreneurship within those companies, the ability not only to start a business, but also to scale it and to invest in those ideas from venture capital, also thinking about patents and job creation rates, the ability to scale that business. So this is a look at what that entrepreneurship index looks like across rural America. So here we're measuring rural America by county. All of our data is by county. So these are non-metropolitan area counties. You can actually scan that QR code and take a look at it yourself. Start clicking around if you haven't done it already. And what you see here is the darker areas are areas where they have a higher pace of entrepreneurship recently. So all of the data is from about 21 to 2023, looking at all of these 11 different indicators. And one thing that we're looking at when we start to look at this is we're starting to look at some spatial patterns, and we can already see some spatial patterns emerge here. You might be noticing the rural Mountain West here. We see the rural Mountain West here really pop up with some darker colors. And we also see entrepreneurship in a smattering of other places across rural America. You can also toggle and put a little check mark next to non-rural if you would like to compare to all of America. This then fills in the map so you can look at this entrepreneurship index across the country. When you click on a county, it also uncovers all of the 11 different indicators that went into this index. So you can start to look at, for your county, what your business creation rate looks like. For example, the average between 21 and 23. It'll give you that red line, which is the average for rural America, and you can see where your county lies on. So here we looked at La Plata County, Colorado. So this is where Durango, Colorado is. Here you can see that their business creation rate is higher than average. The 3-year average is higher. You can also see it for the most recent year, what that is. You can see their job creation rates. You can see the type of venture capital that they've been able to raise. You can also see the number of patents and the share of self-employment, the business exit rates. Yes, even those exit rates are higher. They go along with those business creation rates. And you can start to uncover all of these different factors we use that make up this kind of pattern of entrepreneurship. So digging down a little bit deeper, one thing that this index does is you can start to uncover some very entrepreneurial places that we might not have heard of or we didn't know that they were as entrepreneurial as they are. So if we look more at that La Plata County, that Durango, Colorado, we can see a place where their economy started from an outdoor economy and we've seen a big pivot toward a startup ecosystem. And we can start to see some of the pieces of that ecosystem when we dig down. We see pieces like Fort Lewis College Center for Innovation, which has been able to anchor the local talent and entrepreneurship pipeline, working with the SBDC of Southwest Colorado and the Southern Ute Tribe to try and build that talent pipeline. We also can see places like the Southwest Colorado Accelerator Program for Entrepreneurs, or SCAPE, supports rural founders with intensive programming covering development, marketing, financing, fundraising, and they pair all of this support and entrepreneurship networks with funds. So here you can see that they pair their founders with Howdy Partners or the Greater Colorado Venture Fund, and also with connections to our own innovation fund, connect with CORI, the CORI Innovation Fund. And from this, you can start to see the types of ideas and founders coming from Durango, Colorado. You can see 2 founders here, Matt and Jim, started off as ski guides, love to be on the mountain. What they don't love is all of the operations associated with spreadsheets and paperwork. And they said there has to be a better way. Technology here is a tool that they said, I think this can make my life easier so I can spend more time on the slopes. And they were able to use SCAPE to actually scale and use their accelerator program to raise capital and help pursue that national market for their business. You also have founders like Julia Taylor. So she is actually a self-taught coder and founder. She's been mission driven from day one. She founded this company to empower women and underserved groups, help teach them those in-demand skills that give them access to remote careers and freelance income, which is especially important in rural America. She also used SCAPE's accelerator program to help her accelerate her business, now with more than 39,000 plus members in over 70 countries. And got to talk about Agile Space Industries. This is a company built on rocket propulsion right here in Durango that started there. You can see that they're tapping into the talent pipeline from Fort Lewis. Their employment has now over 100 people. There's a picture of the folks there at Agile Space Industries. They've also been backed by the Greater Colorado Venture Fund and the CORI Innovation Fund, helping to bring out this innovation and this entrepreneurship and support it in rural America. So going back to the index, when we look at this index, we start to uncover places that we might not have known were entrepreneurial. And we also start to see patterns. We talked about the patterns we might see when we look at it and we look at the rural Mountain West there. One pattern that I noticed, we see rural places tend to lead on capacity. They have the capacity and desire and the ideas for entrepreneurship. They lag on scaling. When we start to uncover what's going on, which is really the important questions we want to start asking, we see things that rural America has less access to the resources needed today to start a business in today's economy. One of those resources is venture capital. So something we talked to you earlier about in a previous report about access to private capital, we found out that while rural America has 12% of the nation's businesses, they only get about 1% of the nation's venture capital. If you look nationally, more than half of the nation's venture capital goes to just 5 large metropolitan areas. We start to see patterns where we can start to uncover what resources rural entrepreneurs don't have access to start to break down those barriers. And I think this index really is about questions. Maybe a little bit right now, less about answers. That's going to be our panel. right? But it's about asking those questions, seeing where we are, every community on their pathway towards building a more entrepreneurial place, and seeing what barriers need to be broken down to support the residents in their town that have those ideas and want to start their own business. But when we think about these patterns and the patterns that we see, data, the way that I think about it, it gives us this 30,000-foot view, right? So here I have a picture of this quilt, going back to the quilt analogy, right? It gives us a high level view of entrepreneurship, of what's going on the ground, but it's not the full picture. We know this. Our panelists today have the boots on the ground knowledge and experience to give us that full picture of how communities are building more entrepreneurial ecosystems where we can start businesses and grow businesses in rural America from the ground up. So, with that, I would like to now turn over the spotlight to Rhonda Laddig here at the Center on Rural Innovation, who is our Director of Entrepreneurship, who can really start to fill in that picture about how rural America is building our rural ecosystems. Thanks, Rhonda.
Thanks, Amanda, and thank you everyone who's here on our webinar today. And thank you especially to our panel who's joining us from all over the United States at various Rural Innovation Network communities. And so I'm excited to talk to you today, to Amanda's point, about more of this boots on the ground work that happens in our communities as you guys support your rural ecosystems. And so we'll start off with introductions today. And so here on our panel, we've got Eric Harry, who's the founding director at the Walcoats Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center in Flathead Valley in Montana. We've also got Rose Reza, who's with us from UNM Taos Hive in Taos, New Mexico. We've got Monica Belak, who's the executive director at Sprocket in Paducah, Kentucky, and we've also got Emily Wells, who's joining us from community and this is the community and engagement manager with Greenlight with the city of Wilson in Wilson, North Carolina. So thank you again all for being here to speak with us. And I'd love to start off today with just giving you all an opportunity to talk to us about specifically your regions. I want to hear from each of you on the communities that you serve and what makes them unique, whether that's something that is a particular industry that's strong in your area, and that's something that a lot of people tend to build businesses around. Maybe you have some outdoor or natural assets that really impact the way that your entrepreneurship ecosystem engages, or maybe there's just some cultural or history or groups of people that we need to know about. But if you could take a minute or two and just explain to us so that all of us better understand where you're working and tell us more about your communities. And so I'm going to start off with Monica. Monica?
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Good to be here. Well, Kentucky is a rural state. So, we've got like 120 counties and I think 115 are rural. So it's a big deal. So what we find is a lot of ag companies, a lot of innovations in the ag industry, trickle to us very easily. Sunnyside egg is one of them. Regenerative farming techniques are very popular, and so you're seeing a lot of that happen here. As, work with drones in the ag industry is also very big. Ways to manage soil. So we see a lot of ag growing up very naturally. But too, when you're a smaller community, but you might be kind of more in that micropolitan, a lot of times you'll have a lot more healthcare as well. So we end up having a lot of physicians who have innovative ideas in the rural health space come to us as well. So that's been a real interesting thing that's trickled to us naturally.
Great, thank you. And so moving around on my screen, Rose, tell us more about Taos.
Taos, New Mexico. Well, hello, everyone, and to my bees watching today, welcome. Taos is northern New Mexico is an incredible, diverse area. We're the home of UNESCO World Heritage Site, Taos Pueblo. We are the home of the top skiing area, Taos Ski Valley. We have a tremendous initiatives in sustainable building, where the Earthship community was created. A lot of sustainable initiatives happening throughout our area. We also have agriculture and the arts, tourism driven industry, the home of the beautiful Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So we have a lot of outdoor excursions and recreation. But we also are faced with challenges within our community. But it is a beautiful place with incredible opportunity for our entrepreneurial community that live there.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And Emily, tell us about Wilson.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. As Rhonda mentioned, my name is Emily Wells, and I work with the city of Wilson here in Wilson, North Carolina. And Wilson is a rural community settled right in between Raleigh and the beach. So we're about 45 minutes from Raleigh. So we get a lot of people who are traveling between our more eastern cities and counties to the Triangle or vice versa. We also sit right on the I-95 corridor. So we have a lot of people traveling up and down the eastern seaboard as well. But at its core, Wilson always has been and still is an agricultural community. So we still have a lot of ag here, and that's space that our organization has really just started working in with agribusiness entrepreneurs in the last couple of years. But we also have a very strong showing in manufacturing industries and also in new pharmaceutical industries. Or businesses that are moving here into Wilson. So our entrepreneurs and remote workers that we work with represent all of those industries, but we also have a thriving downtown that's centered around our Wallace Simpson Whirligig Park. If you're not familiar with the Whirligigs, you just have to look them up. They are incredible. So we work a lot with our local business owners, our downtown business owners, and a lot of our members that work here in the co-working space with us offer support and resources to small businesses. So a very diverse, very creative community.
That's great. So I'm hearing ag, I'm hearing healthcare, I'm hearing about some amazing natural resources. Eric, tell us about Northwest Montana. What's going on?
Absolutely. So it's actually a complex question to answer because we've experienced significant immigration over the last couple of years. So the valley has changed tremendously over the last, I guess, since COVID, really. So we have a lot of tourism and recreation here. We have Glacier National Park. We get 3 million visitors a year. We also have Whitefish Mountain, and then we have these beautiful lakes and rivers. So we have this beautiful place, but we also have real challenges in a rural community. So a lot of Main Street, blue collar businesses, contractors, and things. But that being said, we have really amazing precision manufacturing here in Northwest Montana that we're growing. And I think we're going to see an influx too of change as folks keep continuing to move in from Silicon Valley and Seattle. We've got a lot of Googlers, Oracle, Intel, you name it. So that's going to bring in a lot more tech forward thinking, and it's exposing our community to that. So I anticipate significant growth in like tech ideas. But for right now, we're a nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem. So like I said, a lot of tourism, recreation, and then we have precision manufacturing, and we're seeing some growth around that as well.
Yeah, and it's like you teed me up for my next question. I specifically am interested in hearing about tech entrepreneurship in your communities. And so actually, Emily, I think I'll start with you. What do you think that when people think about trying to build tech businesses or to grow tech or tech-enabled businesses, what do you think people maybe misunderstand about doing that in a smaller community, specifically with your experience with what you've done in Wilson?
I think the first misconception that a lot of people have when they think about starting a tech business in a rural area is just that it doesn't happen, especially here where we are in North Carolina, situated so close to the Triangle and the RTP area. I think most people think just by default, because that's such a influential technology development area, that everything just goes that way, and that just isn't the case. There's technology advancement happening at all levels and in all communities, and whether it is a massive company of people working or just one person who has an idea. I think that's the biggest misconception. I think the other misconception that a lot of people have is that access is just easy everywhere, and that's also not the case. We're fortunate here in Wilson to be able to maintain our own fiber broadband system. So that's part of our mission, is to help business owners and entrepreneurs connect to that infrastructure to grow their business. But that's not the case in a lot of rural communities, and expanding that access is still very difficult, and it takes time and it takes manpower and it takes money. So I think those are just a couple that it is happening in rural areas, and there are a lot of really useful, creative things happening in tech development, but you need the infrastructure to do that.
And I think that that's what, Wilson is really, you guys spent a lot of time and energy bringing that broadband up to the community. And now that you have that, you're really seeing, okay, when we resource our communities the way that they need, we're able to do that. And I wonder for you too, Monica, in Paducah, I mean, this smaller community situated on the river, I mean, such a beautiful part of our country. You guys are churning out some really impressive tech startups. What do you think are some of the misconceptions people have about doing tech entrepreneurship or building a tech startup in a smaller community?
I think the biggest misconception, and I think why people are always shocked that there's something, it's like they can't believe, I'm like, well, we have talented people, but I think that's it. I think you kind of think, well, you don't probably have talented people who are innovatively thinking about problems in their industries and in their lives. And so I think when you can start shining a light on those innovative thinkers, it really spurs the rest of the community. We've only been open since 2021, so we're very new at this. And what we've noticed is, wow, it was really hard to get started, and it was really slow, and it was really hard. But once it started moving, once the flywheel gets going, it really is where you can kind of stand back a little bit more, and those people start connecting, and they start connecting each other. I also think the value of being in these smaller communities, and even in a smaller state, I've got 4 million people in my state, is that we're really connected. So
Right.
when we do need a resource, it's like 1 or 2 calls away. I mean, it's very easy for me to even access an investor in another part of the state. So that has been something that I think people undervalue, is that we can work really fast and we're really tight network. So I think it helps us with the speed of getting things funded or even to market.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That power of community, that power of connection, the nimbleness that can be available
Yep.
sometimes in a smaller community is really powerful. And Rose, I wonder from you if you want to talk a little bit about within the work that you've done for a long time now with Taos Hive, and what have you seen that's really moved the needle, gotten that flywheel going in your community, in your experience? And then I also kind of follow up. I wonder if there's anything you want to share that you guys tried and maybe didn't go the way that you thought.
We've been very fortunate in northern New Mexico. Number one, we're a private-public partnership of Kit Carson Electric Cooperative, UNM Taos, and the Taos Community Foundation. And Kit Carson we have the fastest fiber, fastest internet than any rural community in the nation, and probably faster than some urban areas. So we have the foundation. So when we first started focusing on what does it take to develop a tech-inclusive ecosystem, we knew that we needed to change the narrative. So we really started through, tech speaker series, through planting the seed that tech is possible in rural America, and ensuring that we were developing the tools that our entrepreneurial ecosystem needed to be successful. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, because we also opened in June of 2021, is we had a huge influx of remote workers from all over. And we were a co-working space at the time. So here they came, and they would, they'd be there. And the first thing I'd say is, what do you do and how can you help us? And they're all like, how can we help you? And so we started really developing an incredible mentorship base of tech specialists who were key in influencing and supporting a lot of our entrepreneurs that had, that wanted to get into this. We also started creating like this creative tech studio where these young individuals who had never tried to create an app created one of our first apps on tourism. But we also look at technology in different ways. Technology is also how can the Hive support strengthening the infrastructure of our community. what you have throughout rural America is you have a lot of different organizations that are dependent on almost 32 different technology softwares to manage one business. My team, we have Brian and Noe who are instrumental in streamlining from museums to other nonprofit institutions and supporting them on streamlining to be more efficient on how they leverage technology in managing their business and managing their data. This is a huge opportunity throughout rural America that our initiative can really support, a more productive ecosystem in total. But we've had some great success stories. But again, it's just every day. It's supporting our entrepreneurs on this journey.
It's truly, I mean, I hear that from you, and I've seen the work that you've done and across so many rural communities. It truly is a community effort to do this. And that's what I hear you saying is that so many organizations have to be involved. And I bet, Eric, that feels really close to you because you're building, like you said, you have a nascent ecosystem and you're really kind of trying to hold the flag and lead the conversation and lead that building in your community. So talk to me a little bit, along the same lines. What has it taken to get that flywheel effect going? Who have you had to bring to the table, and maybe have in the period of time that you've been doing this, do you already have some lessons learned or things that you think, oh wow, I might have maybe done that a little bit differently?
I think, the reality is I love the community aspect. I mean, we can use fancy language like entrepreneurial density, but the reality is like this starts with community. When you convene entrepreneurs over time, the quality of the ideas grow. And that creates the gravity you need to bring in the folks that, to support entrepreneurs, but you really need to focus on building around active entrepreneurs. Otherwise, you become, no offense to bankers and realtors, but you become part of that circuit, and we don't want to do that. We want to support entrepreneurs. But it starts with a community. It also starts with a give first mindset. I mean, truly, like we have to change the culture from scarcity to abundance. If everyone shows up ready to give, then everyone gets. And that's a huge benefit. And I think the thing that I want to say that's most important is, as an entrepreneur, I attended accelerators and pitch competitions and networking events. I have an MBA. I read all the books, and those things were helpful, but they were never as helpful as getting connected to the right person at the right time. And that is true now as in the entrepreneurial support role. The data backs that up. The most powerful thing you can do for an entrepreneur is getting them connected to the right person at the right time. And so for me, it's less about programs, although those are important because it's convening and all those things and it gets you grants. But that's not really what moves the needle. It's actually building a network with really like warm handoffs, making sure everyone's getting connected. And that's really, really hard work. That's hard to scale. So I wouldn't change it. It's just that like I'm doubling down on it and I will figure out how to get that funded over time. But that's the thing that's actually going to change our community, except it's not in 2 years, it's probably in 5 or 10. So the time horizon is much longer, but that's really what you need to build a strong foundation to actually move something forward.
Wow, you're absolutely right. I mean, how many times have each of us on this call heard somebody say the entrepreneurs need to be at the table, they need to be at the center of this, they need to be leading this. And if we're doing our jobs right, we're wind in the sails of those entrepreneurs. We're facilitators and force multipliers and helping them do more. So I love hearing all of that. I'd love to hear, and this is a fantasy question, but let's say you could wave a magic wand and solve a problem in your community for building your tech entrepreneurship ecosystem. I'd love to hear if you just, one wish, the wish that you could make today to solve something in your community. And I'll actually, I'll let you guys choose who feels like answering that question. Because I know you're thinking of something.
I would
I
say
know
the
what I
hard,
want. Oh,
oh,
go ahead, Eric.
okay, for me, and I think this is probably true for everyone. And look, it's same problem that everyone has. It's that sometimes we as humans struggle to get along. We struggle to work together. If I had a magic wand, I would fix the psychological barrier that is all these different organizations, like just wave a wand and we all realize, hey, if we all work together, we move the thing forward for everyone and we all win. Like that's the thing I wish I could fix immediately. But unfortunately, as we all know, that's incredibly hard work. It takes a lot of time. you usually have to go first and go positive, and you have frustrations and you have to kind of take steps back and move to the side. But if I could just wave one and then everyone's getting along and everyone sees why this actually moves us forward when we work together, that's what I would do.
Great. It's all about people, right?
Yeah.
We're all in the game of working with people and helping people. Monica, I'd love to hear your answer to that as well.
Well, okay, I had something different now. I'm gonna piggyback off of Eric's though, because I think that that's true, not only to get along, but just understanding why it's important to support small business and tech entrepreneurs. That has been probably the hardest part of my job is every year I go back and I explain to donors and new politicians that are coming in on the scene and hey, why are we doing our work and why is this happening and how can you see it? And it's hard because especially with technology, until 2020, I was not able to explain this to anyone. And then they finally got it when COVID hit, and everybody was like, I'm relying on tech. And you're like, yeah, see, there you go. See how that's facilitating all this communication. See how you're still making
Right.
transactions and able to move that. So I think that's still like a constant conversation. And so it would be, phenomenal if everybody's like, oh yeah, that is important. And oh yeah, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur. Like you've got to bring in your own paycheck. Wow. And there's a real grind to it that and a real high tolerance for risk that sometimes we don't understand in some of the other communities. So that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the importance of things like the Entrepreneurship Index tool
Mm-hmm.
and these conversations is so that we can better frame why this stuff matters. As we spend just the last like 2 minutes here, I'd love to hear from each of you just one thing that you're really optimistic about right now in your community, for your tech entrepreneurs, for your ecosystem building. What's something that just makes you optimistic or that you're really excited about that's going on? Let's start actually with Rose.
I'm excited about my team. They are very dedicated to our cause. They are very committed to serving our community, and all about not looking at problems, but as opportunities of it's amazing the work that we've gotten done. So I'm very confident that we will continue moving forward to support our community and our entrepreneurial ecosystem.
I love that. Emily, what about from you?
Yeah, I was what Monica and Eric both just shared resonated with me, and I was thinking similarly, if I could just like wave a magic wand, I would try to take away people's hesitation and anxiety about stepping into entrepreneurship. And I do think that's where this index tool can come in handy because it can make it more clear what the challenges and pitfalls are. But I would have said, the limiting factors that you may not initially consider when you're making your business plan, but then when you think about your day-to-day life, childcare, transportation, insurance, what are the
Yeah.
things, device access that might be a challenge to me if I step out in entrepreneurship? And what excites me, at least here in Wilson and our work with Gig East and Greenlight, is that our community partners are doing a really, really great job of trying to fill those gaps together, whether it's our chamber finding insurance opportunities for small business owners or our city services trying to help provide affordable, reliable transportation. It's not always perfect, and that's why it's important to bring people to the table consistently and regularly. But I'm really excited about the synergy and the cooperation we have here in our community.
Great. I have just 10 seconds. Eric, Monica, something really quick that you're optimistic about in your community.
Oh, sure. So I would say that our current economic situation and with the growth of I think that it's created a lot of constraints and fear, which I think the silver lining is that entrepreneurs will be born from this. We'll have
Yeah.
really good solutions to hard problems because usually that's where it comes from with the constraints. But also, I think that people are going to have to find a new way to earn an income. And so entrepreneurship becomes a real economic lever for our community.
Love that. And Monica, to wrap us up.
All right, I'm going to say it because the last 2 days I've been seeing this all over my space. Humans are amazing. It
Mm.
doesn't matter how old they are. I see, 20 and 30-year-olds working with 50 and 60-year-olds and even 70-year-olds here. And it's amazing when people are so giving, just like you said, Eric, give first mentality. And you get these seasoned entrepreneurs working with these younger, new idea or early entrepreneur stage. Phenomenal things can happen in absolutely any community. Just get the right people together.
I love that. Thank you so much to our panelists for giving us such great information. And now we'll hear directly from an entrepreneur from a rural community. And I'd like to invite our Chief Innovation Officer and the managing partner of the CORI Innovation Fund to facilitate that chat, Jay Bachhaus.
Hi, everybody. Jay Bachhaus here. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at CORI, and I manage the CORI Innovation Fund. I'm joined today by Dusty Burge. We invested in Dusty's company about a year ago. He is the CEO of Fast Forward in Kearney, Nebraska. And I'll turn it over to Dusty now just to tell you a little bit about his business, his background, and how he founded the company.
Hey, thanks a bunch, Jay. I'm actually a first-gen college grad and from a town of about 900 people in a town called Benkelman, Nebraska. And so my utility experience began from a career opportunity out of college. And the U.S. electrical grid is actually the largest machine on Earth. And although it works well, there's plenty of opportunities to improve it. And I've found a lot of joy on focusing on the reliability, safety, and efficiency initiatives. And I live in currently, Kearney, Nebraska, and got an opportunity to join the Motion Accelerator out of Lincoln, Nebraska in 2021. Crafted a handful of ideas and validated that Fast Forward would be the most impactful for rural America, of which I was born from and pretty passionate about.
Dusty, tell us a little bit about the company's mission and what you physically do for the utilities.
Sure. So Fast Forward, we're going to lead the innovative technology that essentially keeps your lights on, and we prevent fires. We help electric utilities serve the communities that depend on them. And so although time is fixed, solutions and technology are accelerating, and hence the name of Fast Forward. And so what we do is we put cameras on a car. We can drive down the road nonstop, and we can find issues on power lines that the utilities can't physically see with the human eye. We quantify those in a really rapid fashion, turn the results around so they can proactively go out and make repairs before the outage starts. And a lot of times those outages, components can fail and they can emit sparks. Those sparks fall to the ground, and that's how a fire can start. So we know if we can prevent the outage altogether by just being super fast and helping utility identify the things that cause those outages, we can prevent the wildfires directly.
Cool. Dusty, tell us a little bit about the team that you've assembled at Fast Forward, and sort of how you were able to bring everybody together around this mission.
Sure. Yeah, we got a team of about 18. We've got four sales team members. We also have 4 full-time drivers. And the majority of our company is all working remote, and more than half of the team has less than 2 years here. And so we're really learning how to better attract great talent, offer remote working opportunities to solve really tough problems. Also, the overwhelming majority of our workforce actually live in rural small towns. And so we found a way to create an above average opportunity for good people and enabled them to stay in the communities that their families like and they have, without having to move to a larger city to be able to support their families. And so I don't know as if there was a perfect formula, but so far we've been able to do that, and it's working well for us. Yeah. Jay, I think you accidentally hit mute there.
Yeah. Talk to us about some of the advantages of starting a business in a rural community. What have you found to be the positives about that experience?
Well, when I was seeking employment, after college, and I believe it remains true today, rural communities, especially here in the Midwest, are known for very reliable and an exceptional work ethic. And so recruiters, come to Kearney and rush to the Midwest to hire because of this work ethic. But some of them don't want to leave. They really like it here. And so we've been able to maximize the rural work ethic that resides here, but also allowing really good opportunities so people don't have to leave. And so that is a really good advantage, is we just have a really good talent pool of people.
And as you've sort of grown through these couple of years of building the business, what are some of the roadblocks that you've met? And are those specific to being in a rural town, or sort of more general, just starting up a business?
Yeah, so for our business specifically, it's very capital intensive. So for example, to build one car costs about $250,000. And so when you watch Shark Tank and they throw numbers around, it's pretty easy to maybe assume that funding's easy to attain. But here in the Midwest, traditional banking institutions don't really weren't really helpful for us because of our business model and the capital intensive nature. And but they want to put the money in the bank so they can, make interest on it. But we don't have that Silicon Valley level of proactive investment and financial support. It's just not here. And so without additional funding mechanisms like CORI and our angel investors that took a risk, gave us some money proactively to prove our idea, and then we can generate revenue and get stuff off the ground. Without that, we would have never got off the ground. And so the funding component is essential, especially for a capital intensive business like Fast Forward.
Was there ever a moment when you were building the business where you thought it was gonna fail? And how did you overcome sort of that fear moment?
Yeah, there's been instances where I didn't know that we were going to fail, but I definitely did not have a plan for what happened. There was one instance that I can recall where a contractor drove our only car through rain, and it ruined a bunch of stuff in the middle of our collection season, and we did not have a backup plan. I called a vendor. They said, "Yeah, you're not going to be able to get through this." So I started tearing stuff apart, and I sent him videos asking for help. And he's like, "You can't do that. You're going to avoid the warranty." And I was like, "Man, that warranty won't matter in 20 days." And he realized, like, oh wow, like they're really in a bind. And the next day we had a tracking number. He found stuff in a shipping container and overnighted it to us. And we got through the season, had no plan for that. But there's been instances like that where we've been presented with a really challenging situation. We just didn't know how to get through it, but we've got through all of them so far.
How do you find the support network for entrepreneurship where you are? I mean, it can be very lonely starting a business, and some of the advantages of starting a business in sort of a hub is there's a lot of other people going through that same experience. How have you sort of overcome that loneliness of being an entrepreneur and found community? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a small entrepreneurship circle here in Kearney. There's a much larger circle in Lincoln and Omaha, larger cities there. And I've got a board that resides in those areas, and they have prior experience, building something from scratch. So that's really been helpful. The other part of it is just having the courage of willing to just try something out, even though I may not have somebody that lives here or works in my office to be that direct mentor. Courage is a big component of just the willingness to try. When I come home at night, my kids absolutely love me. So it's nice to be able to have the courage to go to work and maybe not have all the answers, but know that I've got the backing and support that if I do need help, I can find people to ask. I just got to be willing to ask the question.
As you have asked those questions over the course of building the business, are there any sort of great nuggets of advice that come to mind, or any pieces that were really bad advice?
Yeah, I just mentally prepared myself that this is what I was going to do. It was plan A. I wasn't going to build a plan B. And I just needed to be able to explore every scenario and every outcome at all times and constantly. A piece of advice that my board, it took me a little while, but they kept making me and encouraging me to think bigger. I had blinders on solving the problem that I was solving. And there's risk with starting something from scratch. And I was trying to not bite off more than I could chew. But having good mentors, they've continually like, think bigger, think bigger. And then when you can actually think bigger and look at your business from the outside in, it's like, oh yeah, we're definitely not thinking big enough. There's more opportunity here. So having good consult is definitely something that I underutilized when I first started. But now that I've got it, I can't live without it.
Nice. Tell us a little bit about what you've accomplished. Like, how's the business grown? It's only you founded this 3 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, so we commercialized our product and idea in 2023, and that was from 5 utilities in Nebraska. But now we're here starting our summer season of 2026. So about 3 years later, we're in 18 states. We've done a few $1 million in revenue. We've got a little bit larger team. We've prevented close to $20 million in outages, or it's hard to quantify a fire that never happens because you never know when it's going to stop. But we know that the economic impact from what we've been given, we've generated way more economic impact as an output than what it's taken to get us started. And that's a good thing. The overwhelming majority of our initial customers are all small towns, villages, small communities, and we provide a service that they can afford, that makes sense on paper for them, but it also will scale to the really big cities as we grow to be able to support those larger communities.
Dusty, tell us a little bit about where you want to take the goal.
Sure. So, we'll become as essential as email is to a utility organization just because of the affordability and the reliability that we can provide and the importance of the electrical grid. And so we'll become a household name. We anticipate opportunities for growing that will expand the team, give us a little bit more revenue to build more cars, but rural America will remain a key focus for us. Part of the reason that we grew so fast is rural America was overlooked. We were calling on customers that no one had called on, and we were able to get orders the same week because they were like, yeah, no one's ever come in, let's try this. And so it's been a key pillar for us. It's an overwhelming majority of our current customer base, but we're going to keep doing our piece. And just as maybe the community sees a Google Street View car driving down the road, everybody now knows what they look like. Soon you'll see a fast forward car in your community, and you'll know, oh man, they're checking the power lines, and then it'll become a common household name that everybody will appreciate because we will be contributing to the lights staying on.
And just to give a plug, if there's anybody in the audience with a connection to a utility or a rural community, how do they find you?
Sure. So our website is ff-ai.com. We actually have a promo and an incentive to help small towns get started. We understand that there's some capital restraints that have prevented a lot of small towns from getting the grid digitized, but we've got a program specifically for rural communities. But yeah, ff-ai.com. We've got contact information there, or we also welcome them to reach out to CORI. You've got my contact information. And yeah, we can go from start to finish in under a month and put a utility that has had nothing or paper maps for years. We can get them digital in under 30 days, and that is unheard of.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dusty. I think a lot of people appreciated hearing a firsthand story from an entrepreneur building a pretty amazing business in a rural town.
Yeah. Thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I will hand it back over to Amanda.
Okay.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Dusty, for sharing all of that with us. It was really inspiring to hear, and I want to thank everybody for being here today. Before I leave you, I just want to share some QR codes. If you've liked what you've heard today at this webinar, please join us on LinkedIn, join us on Facebook, follow us, join our newsletter. We will have content coming out in the future that really gives rural America the information and the resources to help them build more innovative economies from the ground up. Thank you and have a great day.